Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about components because I think components is probably one of the most missed opportunities for taking your app from this level to a much larger level. Components will make your app solution have a much better maintenance story, and you would notice that once you use components, they will scale. Now, if you look at my screen, what we're going to do here is that we're going to walk through this wireframe. What part of my design solution is a great candidate for a custom component? So we'll talk through that. But here, if you look at this wireframe, the left nav is a great candidate for a custom component, as well as the header, because once I go through my various screens outside of the dialog boxes, those are the pieces of my screen that kind of remain the same or may have small tweaks to them. So in this video, we're actually going to use custom components, talk about the different scenarios and the secret feature that can really make a difference when you're using components within your solution. So let's get started. All right, so what we're going to walk through on this video is using components, right, to reuse functionality and capabilities across screens and Power Apps. And this is really important. So if you look at this wireframe, you would notice that this left navigation, it has some functionality, but it's the same across all my screens. And the same with the header, right? The header is going to be the same, basically the same layout, but you have some variant here in the title. And those are very great candidates for components, you know, just to group this type of functionality or group this type of layout and reuse that across your screens, because some of your solutions maybe have 5, 10, or 15 screens in those common areas. One, you want to be consistent, pixel perfect in their XY coordinate, and then also from a maintenance perspective, you just don't want to have all these copies going across your various screens. So let's jump into it. Now, I've been practicing with this, so most of you know that I shoot all my videos with one take, but I may shoot the video, I may practice prior to making the video. Like, so I'm probably edit out the dead space, but all of my videos in one take, and that's just, you know, just practice, right? Being a practitioner, you're going to do the same things. It's just like martial arts, repetitive, repetitive, repetitive. So I say all that to say, if I go to this client's, I've been playing around with this form, so I wanted to go back to a prior version. Now, I was starting to do that before shooting this video. Then it dawned on me. I was like, well, what if they need to figure out like how to roll back a previous version in Power Apps? Now, you have that. Now, there's two Power Apps we're talking about, right? We have the Power App SharePoint Form, and then we have the Power App Canvas app, and how you get to this different. So in the SharePoint Form, to roll back to a previous version of your Power App, what you want to do is go to the gear icon, list settings, and then go to form settings. And then right here is tucked away right here on see versions and usage. Click on that. And this is the best way to do it because you can see in my other tabs, I'm on this screen, but I do not have Power App Studio open. And that's going to be the key because you can't restore a previous version if you have Power App Studio open, right? So here I select the version that I want to restore. I want to restore this version 3. Go ahead and click restore, and this is going to flash me back. So now this point in time, version 3, what it doesn't push this up, right? So you're not going to see your latest version called version 3. It just create another version with the components or the details of version 3. While we're here, let me point something else out to you. Notice this Power App release column in the version numbers here, right? The Power Apps is updating for you by Microsoft in the background. And most of the time, if there is a breaking change, and I just experienced this probably like 6 weeks ago, there was a breaking change because I was actually using components, the very topic I'm going to show you here, inside of a form component. And Microsoft had white paper saying that it's not supported, it's not supported, not supported. Well, I tried it because I needed that. I needed a reusable functionality inside of a data card, and I just did it as a component, and it worked. I was like, okay, it worked. But with a release, and I don't know if it's going to be this release, 49 or a previous release, but in a release, we published that form, and it stopped working. And, you know, the form component will not even render. So pay attention to these releases, right? And they only impact you if you republish your existing form. So if they have a break and change and you're running at runtime, it probably won't show that it broke your version, right? Because the version of Power App release is going to ride with you at that point in time. But as you publish, you're going to get the latest, your code coupled with the latest Power App release, and that as a unit becomes the published version. So if there's an issue, just pay attention to that. So pay attention to that release. Anyway, all that said, our version 7 is going to be where we need to be for 821. And let's go ahead and get started with this particular topic. So let me go ahead and go to my list, and now I'm version 7, roll back, and I should be able to click on this form and then click on launch this in Power App Studio, and now I should be able to play around with that version. While that's loading, there's something else I mentioned, but I didn't highlight. I didn't highlight. Here is this published column. Understand that I rolled this back, but I wrote version 7 to be available to me in Power App Studio. This is not the runtime version that my end users are using. So my end user is going to use whatever version this live badge is associated with. So my end users are on 3, but in Power App Studio, I'm going to see 7. Right, because I did a restore, these are going to be one and the same, but you can see that I was playing around like earlier today. So, if I restored version 5, I can get more functionality. Actually, this is me practicing the component. I can actually show you that in Power App Studio without revealing that change in runtime. So it's very powerful, but just understand like what the badge means, how that impacts your end user, what release of Power Apps you're working with, so on and so forth, and that may help you out with troubleshooting. So just a little tidbit. All of that to say, let's go ahead and get started. So here we go. We own our form. Yep, this is exactly what we need to be. So we have a single screen, and we have these components. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and copy this because this is nothing right now. Like I don't have an issue currently if I'm doing a single screen, but let me go ahead and put 4 of these on the studio tree view here. So let me do one more duplicate screen. Okay, so this is enough. So now what I have screen main. Let me go ahead and rename this to screen main. Is going to map to my client details. So I want to do a screen for engagement, vehicles, and history. So let me go ahead and crank those out real quick. So all you do is just go to rename. All right, so now I'm golden. So most of the time, if you're just getting started and before components were even introduced, what we would do, we would just duplicate these screens as we did before, and all of these components would come over with that initial copy state, right? So for make heads or tails to this, what I want to do is show that when I'm on the engagement screen, highlight engagement with red, highlight client details with green, meaning that I already passed through that part of the process, and then anything that's yet to come, keep that in that mute gray right color. So before that, I would just go to each screen and modify them and do what we need to do, and most of the time that will be fine. Up until there is some maintenance, right? There is a change. Okay, now we want to add a step 5. Now, based on the number of screens, that change is times 5, right? Components is going to make that, centralize that change. You update it once, and then you make it happen. But using components adds a certain level of complexity. So let's tiptoe into components with using the header. So let's just do this, and then we'll circle back and do navigation. So if I click on the components tab here, create a new one. Again, this is my naming convention. I'm gonna just go ahead and rename this to CMP for component, and then let's just call it the header. Now, most of the time, I've already played around with these XY coordinates to get this together. So I'm gonna just simply drag and drop and select everything in the header, right click on one of these bubbles. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Keep forgetting that my resolution may be a little bit too high. So let me just Control C to copy it. Flip over to my component, Control V to paste it in. And where did it? So I'm off canvas, right? So now what I need to do is to stretch my component size to kind of fit within my area. So let me grab the rectangle, look at my coordinates pane here. My width is 1185. Select my component, change that to 1185, right? And now if I zoom out, now I'm encapsulating all of that. So now I need to get a height it's hard for me to determine the height. So what I'm gonna do, and here's a little trick I have, I grab a rectangle, almost like a ruler, and I use it as a ruler. So I say, okay, I need to stretch this across. What is the height for this? So if I overshadow this, maybe I can take it to the back, zoom in, make sure I have that bottom rectangle in place. So that's going to be my height. My height's going to be 78, so that's where I want my canvas to be. All right, so now that I'm done with this, I can take my ruler, aka my rectangle, and then delete it. And that's the easiest way. Now, I don't have to be spot on. Like, my height don't have to be exactly under this horizontal rule, right? Because I can clip it, right, once I bring it onto the canvas of the screen. You will see that here in a second. Now, I'm not comfortable with my logo being on the edge of this. So a couple things I can do. I can either, one, increase my header. Let's call it 1190. Or on the flip side, no, actually I'm gonna do both. I can move my logo over just to the right a little bit so it's on spot. All right, so this should be ready to go. So this is very, very simple. So now that I have this component, let's switch over to the screen. Let's go to screen main. We'll start tackling these one at a time. And I'm gonna just go ahead and replace this with my component. So to do that, you just do insert here, go to custom, and all your custom components will be here waiting for you, right? And then that's going to drop it in the 0, coordinate, so I'm ready to rock and roll. So on the surface, other than the logo kind of toggling a little bit, I should be spot on. Now, this is where the magic is. If we look at our wireframe says for a header, as you go from screen to screen, your header title changes. So for a component, what we have to do is make that a variable to where, we can pass in. Let's say, okay, when I'm on screen engage, set a property on my custom component to give it the name that I want to show up here. So let's go ahead and add that. So to add any property or inputs or outputs, right, for these components, just select a component, go over here to custom property, hit new. Now, your display name is what's going to appear here, because once you have your component selected on the screen when you're using it, this drop down, this is what you're doing. You're adding to this drop down. You're adding custom properties to the drop down for your component when it's selected. So the display name is what gets displayed there. So let's just call this header title. And then your internal name, I'm okay with this, with the internal name being my display name without the needed spaces. It's going to do that for me. If I want to get, more precise, or maybe I have a naming convention what my internal names are going to be, I can change it here. And then here I'm just say the title of the header, just to kind of get them. And then this is the direction. Is this something that the component is providing out, or is this something that you're setting as a user of the component, you're setting in, and that's going to be the input. So in our case, it's going to be input, and it's going to be a string text, and we're going to hit create. All right, now to use this, so right now, if I zoom out, right here on my component, I have this hard coded, right? So I have a label here, and I'm hard coding the text. So let's switch over here to the text property, and I want to have this dynamic. Let me show you a couple things here, actually. So here I want to have this dynamic. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, because I'm going to show you how you can set this to be the default property for your header. And then I'm going to just go ahead and replace it. Now, to reference an input that you have, the first thing you have to do is give the name of your component. In our case, is CMP header dot, and then all your custom properties, as well as your out of the box properties, will be here. So here, let's just go ahead and do header title, and notice that in the formula, this is going to be the internal name, right? And now what I want to do, if I go to the component and then select advanced, notice what happens in the header title. So any custom component that I have, in the header title, I can specify a default value. This is before the client or the user of this component actually specify the value. So I can do a default, and this is where I want to paste in that text that I copy. So if they don't specify this property, it's always going to use client details. Okay, so now if I switch over the screen, I should be actually in the same place, but now I have the flexibility to change this. So if I go down to the component header, hit this drop down, there's it didn't use the display name. Interesting. So here I have, and you notice how you have the default title, and for that one I'm good. So now let me copy this component, go to screen engagement, paste it in. Oh, I didn't remove all the hard-coded text. Let me do this, or else things get confusing. All right, so now let me grab my component, slide to the 0, 0 coordinate. And now this is where I want to call this the engagement details. That's the title of this screen. So now I just go with my component selected, header title, engagement details. So just like that. So now if I toggle between the two screens, you would notice that same component, different parameter, and this is working as expected, right? So now let me just go ahead and drop this in for all the rest of the screens. Okay, so now that I have my component set for each one of the screens, and then I have my title set for each one of the component properties, we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do something very similar, but this time tackle this left navigation. Now with this left navigation, this is where a component really starts to shine, because it's more than just the title. The title is 90% the same. The only variant is going to be the title of the header, right? But in the navigation, I have these click events to navigate between these screens. I have color logic to kind of show, like, okay, if it's active, show red. If it's not active, show green. If it's, you know, yet to be active or yet to be handled, go ahead and show gray. So there's going to be some logic. And again, this is one of the beauty, because I don't want to duplicate, triplicate, or 10x that logic across the number of screens that I have. I want to centralize that so that way I have a beautiful maintenance story. So again, so to get this started, let's just hit our component tree here, rename it, just call this navigation. And now I just want to, I already spent the time and the energy to get this laid out, so I just want to select everything. I don't want that vertical, hold on my control key to deselect that. Well, let me just copy everything and then I'll delete it. Control C to copy, go to your component, Control V to paste. And again, it's one of those situations where I need to get my ruler out. So let's just go ahead and bring in my rectangle for my sizing of my component. Take this all the way down. Ooh, I can't bust through. Look at that. Oh, this is not going to work for me. Let me just use this rectangle to size it. I'm trying to get a height, right? So here I'm going to make the height of that ruler, that line break that we had is 718. So I'm going to make my component, let's just call it 725. Oh, that didn't do it because I'm not at the 0, 0 coordinate. Hold on, let me play around with this. All right, so I'm okay with the height. So here I have to reposition it to 0, 0. So that way when I use this component on the screen, I'm going to have to position it at where I want it to start. I'm going to kill this vertical bar in my component. That's a situation for the screen. That's not something I'm bringing in with the left nav. The only thing I want to bring in the left nav is the circle, the background bar or rectangle within the circle, and then my text. But I will use a rectangle ruler, all right, in this scenario, just to kind of figure out what my width should be. And I'm going to just round this up and call it a 280. So that's where I'm going to do my width for my component. All right. So now that I have this all sized to where I'm happy with it, I'm going to just go ahead and remove this. Let me just zoom in. I see some UI situation here that I need to go ahead and center this ruler or adjust the height on the ruler. Let's just call it. Okay. So now that I'm aligned, let's go ahead and jump into the formula that's needed for this. Now let's talk about the strategy. The strategy is that I have to look at this in sequence, and I want to go generic, right? So I don't want to call any of my formulas or properties client details, engagement, vehicle. So I want to do generic. So in a generic sense, I want to do, let's just call these stages and just call this stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Now, part of that is that I need a number to work with, and you will see here in the second one we talk about the formula. So doing the stage number 1 allows me to use numeric values, so that way I can do greater than, less than, and then that type of situation, right? Because when on vehicles, I want this to be red, and that's going to say if stage equals 3, right? So if I'm in the 3rd position, then it's red. But for engagement, if it's not 2, it's either going to be green or gray. Green means that I went through it already. Gray means that I'm not on that step yet. So green means I pass through that step. So if I'm on vehicles, this should be green and this should be green and this should be gray. Now, if I use a numbering or a numeric value in my logic, now I can use greater than, because now it's like, okay, if the current state or stage is 3, that means 3 is greater than 2 and is greater than 1. So now my formula is, if I'm equal to 1, or if I'm greater than 1 is green. If I'm equal to 1 is red, else I'm gray, right? So I think if you look at the logic in there, and it took me, I didn't just think of this and like, oh yeah, dude, you're a genius. This came through practice, right? This came through practice where I tried a formula, got it to work, but it felt like it was hacky, and it didn't support a maintenance scenario. What's the maintenance scenario? The maintenance scenario, you're working with the client and they come back, or the business user, and they come back and say, oh, now there's a 5th screen. So now we need to incorporate this 5th scenario. What does that mean to your formula scenario here, right? And how do you fit that in and do it, throw everything out the water? So to support, not only to make the logic clean, and you will see this, it sounds a little confusing here until you see it in practice, but not only does it make the logic clean, but it also support you adding screens or removing screens, and with that, with not a lot of fuss. So the first thing we need to do is set up a anchor that says, what is the current state, right? Or what is the current stage? So let's just go here. So let's just do a new custom property. Let's just say, let's call this the active stage number, right? And, oh, we can put spaces in here to make it user-friendly. It seems like it's not using display name. I have yet to see it where it uses display name. And then this is going to, all right, so this can be the active stage of the navigation, or it could be step, right? It could be the active step. Step is probably a better way. But either way, I'm going to stick with stage. And then the input is going to be in, because we're expecting this value to come in. And then the data type, here's the key. I want to use number. Now my greater than, less than logic can kick in because I'm using numeric values, and then go ahead and create this. Now let's see what the logic looks like. The first thing I want to do is grab the colors, right? So let's just say I know what the red is. So let me click on this, get this RGB for the red. And let's just go ahead and store that there, right? And now I know what the gray is, so let me get the RGB for the gray. Now here on the notepad, I don't know what's what, so let me just put in a little internal note here. This is the red, and that's the gray. We don't have a green yet, so let's establish a green. So select the same fill color, hit my palette. You want to go with that green? Yeah, let's go. Or do you want to go with a lighter green? Yeah, let's go with the darker one. All right, so here's my green. So let's go ahead and capture that. All right, so now that we have our 3 color states, right, let's go ahead and put this in practice. So let's start with this guy here. So with this one, the field, now this is the if statement. Here's the logic. Ready? Here's the logic. Okay, let's go. If, and let's put, now here's another thing. When you typing this out, go ahead and put your comma there, because as you're using IntelliSense and all this other stuff, it won't erase this or delete this. So here's, that's just a pro tip. Throw your comment in there so that way you can type and use IntelliSense and it doesn't impact the thing you want to state. So what do we want to do? So we want to do red. So if the component property, that's navigation, so component dot active stage number, if it's equal to 1, right, because our first position is going to be the first position. So if it's equal to 1, it's red. That means that step 1 is active. Else, if the component navigation active stage is greater than 1, that means you're past that step, we want to use the green. So let's go and grab our green RGB, right? Else, now notice a nested if, right? So here, here is my, this is an if, this is an else if, right? And because it's in the else position of the first, so that's an else if. Else, like if it doesn't pass this, it doesn't pass this, then it's going to be our third stage, which is going to be gray. And I don't need to test for this, right? So if you're not condition 1, you're not condition 2, then just go ahead and make it gray. That means that you haven't touched it yet, right? So close the parenthesis. Now you have to figure out how many close parentheses you need to make this syntax correct, right? So as soon as I close that, note how the associated open parenthesis that it's associated with gets highlighted. And I keep doing this until I get the final highlight in the first open paren. That's just a tip that, again, if you pay attention to the signals, typing these up, doing nested, and knowing where you are in the formula is not a big deal. You kind of figure it out. Okay, that's our formula. Now, it's not that bad, right? So let's go ahead and test this. So now what we want to do is, how can you test it? Just click on navigation, click on active state, click on advanced, and the default value is 100. So let's go ahead and set this to 2. Okay, set it to 1, set it to 3. All right, so we don't have enough to play with, but this is how you can test the different parameters just to make sure that these are lighting up the way they should. Let's go ahead and drop it in so we have more test conditions to play with. Now, if you have this one, let's copy this because I don't want to sit here and type it over. Let's go to number 2. Watch this. Oh, see, I did my Control A and screw stuff up. Hold on. Wow, this gave me double of everything. 1 second, let me, oh my goodness. Let me get rid of this copy I just created. Okay, that was nasty. Even Control Z would not back it out. That's not comforting at all. All right, so here, I guess I could have used this. Nope, see, I can only go back so far. Interesting. Anyway, so here, let me, to my field, make sure your cursor is inside of the formula box. Then you can do your Control A, Control C to copy it. Click out, hit your second circle, select your field, get inside that formula box before you start using your keyboard shortcuts, or else it seems like it goes a weird place in history and start grabbing stuff. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just go through each one of these circles to paste that in because I don't want to experience that again. Okay, so when it comes to my circles, I'm primed and ready to go with my formula. Now I just need to adjust the formula to make it consistent for that area. So let's go to our second position. And this is super easy because all you have to do is if the active stage equals, in our scenario now, is 2, or if the active stage is greater than 2, right? So if it's equal to 2, giving me the red. If it's greater than 2, I pass through it. Give me the green, else give me the gray. So for my formulas, all I have to do is just change this number to the active stage. Perfect. So now what I want to do is select your component, and I'll show you again how to get this. Select your property, go to advanced. Actually, I don't think you have to select the property. Just select the component, go to the advanced tab, and then here you will see your custom property. And then here you can just play around with it. So if I give it 1, looks good. 2, 3, 4, looks great. What happens if I give it 99? You pass through all of them because you're on the 99th step. We don't support 99, but at least it didn't break, right? What happens if I do 0? I'm not on either step. This should never be the case, right? Because even if you're doing a brand new entry, you're going to start on client details 1, but we support it. And so we're supporting the out of the bounds, we're supporting the inbounds, and everything looks great. So we're going to default this to a 1, right? And this is going to be our stage. Okay, so let's use this and make sure that this works as expected on the screen itself. So we switch over to the screen. Let me zoom out, and let's just go to the main screen. And yep, these are my individual components. So we want to bring in our custom component. So let's go ahead and select all of this. All right, so now I have this cleared out. Let's go ahead and bring in our custom component by the insert menu, custom nav. Now we have to reposition this to go to our XY coordinate that we desire, okay? And we can even squeeze this in to be on the left side of that dividing bar. Okay, so I think we're good to go. Now, once we have this component here on the main screen, because this is going to be the first position, what we want to do is set the stage to number 1, which is the default, so there's nothing to change here. Because I already went through the process of setting the XY coordinate, and I want that to be the exact same for all my other screens, what I do is copy it from the main screen, go to an engagement, delete the residue that's there, and now on the screen, with the screen engagement selected, go to the ellipsis and hit paste. and that's going to bring over the same XY as on the main. So as you toggle between them, you notice how I don't have any jump or any shift within my navigation. Again, that's just another tip and trick on how you can get these to be pixel perfect position as you go between them, and the only thing that should change between them is the stage. So now let's go ahead to screen engagement, select my navigation, and then here for the active stage number, now that I'm on 2, that's going to adjust accordingly. So now if I toggle between them, this is giving the effect that I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and do the exact same thing for vehicles and history. Okay, so now if we test this out, now we have everything there. As I'm navigating between the various screens, you will notice that this navigation is lighting up the way that we expect. Now here's the last thing to do. Now let me show you the power of using the component system to centralize functionality and capability. Now you notice that as I bounce between these, there's nothing happening to, even though my colors are spot on for my circles, there's nothing happening to my text. And how can we do that now? So we need to apply some type of logic for the text. So let's go ahead and switch over to our component. And now we need to say if, let's go to, so now if we go to the colors and you look the difference between them. So when it's an active screen, the color is going to be this darker color. And if it's an inactive screen, it's going to be this lighter color. So let's go ahead and capture that. Okay, so if I'm looking at this, the impact now is that I have 3 conditions, right? So I have the active, I have pass through, and then I have not yet active, right? So we need to make a decision on what color we're going to use when we're passed through, because we don't have that yet. So maybe when we're passed through, maybe we're set on the light. Let's just see what it looks like. And then we kind of go from there. So what's the logic? The logic is going to be, here's the good news. The logic is going to be the exact same. So if I select everything, again, just make sure your cursor is inside this formula before you do a select A. So if I select everything, go to my second stage title, which is going to be engagement, and then paste that in, really all I need to do is to change the formula. Actually, sorry, let's do this for stage 1 first. So all we have to do now is change the formula color. So if I'm active, I want to be here, and if I'm not active, I want to be here. So let's go ahead and update this for the other stages. So once I have my first position, stage 1, wired up, I can copy this and then do the exact same for all my other stages and just change the stage number. All right, so now I have everything pasted. Go to my 4, change my stage number, go to my 3, change the stage number, and then go to the 2 and then change the stage number. Now here's the power. Now that I have my formulas updated to test this out, I just go to the screens, toggle between them, and just like that, I made the change in one spot, and every screen my component is being used, there was no change required. That's the maintenance story, and that's the beauty that we get into. It's a beautiful thing once it works. All right, so now I want to say that's it. Now, let's grow into this. I don't want to do this in this video, but the other one could be, actually, yeah, let's just do it now. This is the bonus. I wasn't planning on doing it, but I think there's a key piece that we need to take into account. Now, the other functionality is that as a user, I will want to, let's look at this in preview mode, be able to click on these to go to that particular screen. And right now, I don't have any functionality to allow me to click between them. Now, we can do that, and there's 2 ways you can do that. So one way, let me just show you why this new feature makes sense now, because once you start using components, you start running into some pitfalls, or you may run into a scenario where you feel like it's a lot of overhead. Now, what we want to do is that we want to be able to click, once they click on this, let me go to this on select. I want to be able to do a navigate to the active for the screen for stage 1, whatever screen that they say is stage 1. I can do that in several different ways. One way would be to create, as you may have guessed, custom properties that says stage 1 screen, or screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, screen 4. So for each one of these, I'm going to reference that screen number, and we can absolutely do that, no problem. And actually, that's probably the recommended way. If you wanted to look at the true design principles for solution architecture, separation of concern, this navigation component should know nothing about the various screens that you have. So having it generic and having the user set these screens makes all the sense in the world. Here's the problem. The problem is from a scale perspective and from a maintenance perspective, what I'm gonna have to do if I go that route and say screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, screen 4 to represent each one of these, for every screen, I need to set all 4 properties, right? So for every screen, I need to say, this is my screen 1, this is screen 2, this is screen 3, this is screen 4. Then I go to engagement. This is screen 1, this is screen 2, this is screen 3. You know, and it's the same value for each one of these, right? It's going to be the exact same value for each one of these. But, you know, that's the maintenance issue, right? Because now if I do a 5th screen, I have to go and touch every screen to readjust it and make sure it has the right order. And again, if you're 1 through 5 or maybe 1 through 10, it's tolerable, it's tedious, it's something you just don't enjoy doing. If you have 20 screens, and not saying that your solution will ever have 20 screens, but it may, right? Once you start looking at dialogues and all of these other scenarios that we kind of work with, you may actually end up with 20 screens. Now it becomes a maintenance nightmare when you have to do that small thing for each and every one. So this is where you kind of bend the principle a little bit from design and enable this feature that just came available, I would say probably only 3 to 4 weeks ago. And the setting is the access app scope. So if you enable this, now what it's going to do, because we all know that when you're on the screen, if I'm on like screen engage, and let's just say I call this like a change event here or a click event if there was a button, I can type in screen and have access or reference any one of these screens here. With that setting disabled, anything that you have here at the global level, global variables, component names, or things along those lines are not going to be available to the component unless this option, access app scope, is enabled. With this disabled, anything that you want to select from the screen, you have to pass in via a property, which is really, in its core sense, the true principle with separation of concern, because the component doesn't bleed into the logic on the screen side. But here we're going to break that rule because from a maintenance perspective, it just makes more sense to go against that rule. So now with this enabled, becomes very simple, and we've done this many, many times. We just start typing in screen. And here's the thing, I don't get IntelliSense, but then again, I don't get yelled at that, screen screen main does not exist, right? It's just not going to help me find it. So I have to have a really good naming convention or be able to bounce between it to make sure I have my names right, because IntelliSense is not going to help me with this. Now, one of the things I do want to do is that because I'm setting this for both the circle and the text, I want to select them both at the same time. And then what this on select is going to do, it's just going to copy whatever I do with the selected items down to those selected items. And I'm going to do the same for here. So select both of those, make sure I have my on select and they select that. So for both of these components, I can tackle them at the same time, and then they're going to be engagement. And then again for this one, have my select selected. Okay, so now that I have all these wired up with their respective screens that they should navigate to if the user clicks on it, let's test this out in live mode. So you hold down the Alt key, and then you click the button. And then here you can see, regardless of what screen I'm on, I can be on vehicles and click on clients, and it knows how to do that. I can be at the very first one and click on the last one, and it knows how to do that. And each one of these, and that's the thing, like when I'm on this screen, I should be able to click around any of these, not necessarily in sequence order. I can skip, Let's go back to vehicles, right? And this is how you test it, right? You go to the same screen and you test all 4 options, all your permutations you have to test, right? And then just make sure for that screen, all your click events are working as expected. And now you have a true navigation working, right? And this was so painless, right? This is painless because of 2 things. One, going in with the right strategy, right? Noticing how we use numbers versus words or text when we wanted to represent the state. That saved us a ton, and it is scalable, and it has a beautiful maintenance story. Step 2 is enabling this when and where possible. Don't abuse it, but enabling this when the scenario presents itself to where this makes sense to say that for this particular component, I need app scope access, so that way I can reference global variables and global components within here. Yeah, I'm going to bend the design principle a bit, but my maintenance story is going to be so much better, and I can go in feeling that I have the right belts and suspenders moving forward, and this component can sustain any test of time and any business requirement that may be thrown at it. We're wrapped and set to go. Now, again, flexing the component benefit, this logo seems so out of place. I just go here, go to the header, take a look at it, reposition it, eyeball it really good, go back to my screen, zoom out. Yep, and that's more like it. And all of my screens are updated, right? I get the flexibility of every static component or static position. I have that, and anywhere I need flexibility to change things within it, I have that. And we don't know what else may come up here. We may run into a scenario where we want the status up here in the header and have that status available for this particular request on each and every screen to the right or left of the logo. We just put that information here in our component, and all of our screens are going to be taken care of, right? So as we kind of go through this journey, you will see some of the maintenance or some of the change in direction that we may encounter, because we don't know everything up front. We don't know what fields we have to add, what screens we're missing, or what else we have to reposition. We just don't know that everything up front. So going into this battle with the right belts and suspenders, with a nice component design in place, we're going to be winning right out the gate. All right, so that's it for this video. Any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If this was helpful, we would super appreciate the like and the subscribe. We're trying to grow the channel. We're trying to get this information out to all app makers globally. So the likes and subscribe really helps us with the YouTube algorithm, and we really do appreciate it. Until then, I'll see you in the next video, and take care.